Hello everyone. The title of today's episode is Communications of Celestial Relativism. And to some degree, Mr. Within would like to Mr. Within would like to speak about the nature of this inner dialogue that extends to our imagination and thought, and how to some degree people feel that even though you are in one individual physical body and you're moving around, the psychology can have a confidence that can visualize an army behind itself, it can visualize all its ancestry behind itself, it can visualize God behind itself, it can visualize many projections of and templates of reality. And none of them are false, and none of them are to some degree true, because the truth we are seeking is an experiential awareness of the true nature of reality. So what I want to simply say here is that, let's say you're a human being and you're walking. Let's say right now, actually, let's make this nice. Let's say right now you're Napoleon, yeah? And you're going back to get the Empire, like some kind of Star Wars, theme. And so you go back to get the Empire, and so the first thing in your mind is that you have such a real intention that you're like, I'm Emperor, man. I'm Emperor, yo. It's like you already see it, yeah? I'm sure Napoleon's way of thinking was much more intense. It's like, yo, I'm Emperor. I'm pretty sure it wasn't like that, but I'm saying Napoleon, as he went to get the Empire, it's as if his what he actually saw as the vision of reality was that he was the center of it. And that reality and that intention and that knowing was, I think, so unique at the time. I mean, you got to think about it. Back in the day, look at this, guys. In today's society, just to, in a parallel way, connect this to this talk. In our society, we see many people living, routines. So if I was like a program designer, I'd be, okay, there's a lot of repetition in human psychology and behavior in regards to how a human being is feeling and thinking that how they should be handled in society, in the social matrix, and even economy as well. So what I'm trying to say here is that back in the day, people didn't change that much either. They just wanted to do whatever they had to do to get by. And so when they suddenly saw someone like Napoleon as if walking, as if the whole country is behind them, people found that profound, perhaps, in French times, of war and whatnot. So one can say that there's people like Napoleon. There's this, I forget this lady's name, but it's this very beautiful quote on online, and what it is like, this lady's like, then I look behind me and I see my whole ancestry behind me, and they say you're the love of thousands or something, and so it's like the whole implication that when you wake up in the morning, are you just an individual body moving around, or are you a mind that is aware that a body is moving, but the mind seems to be the whole moment, and the whole moment doesn't seem to be separate from everything else? That means in one moment of being can have the truest realization of the true nature of all moments of being. Do you realize that? We are cosmically existent, and we are experiencing a reality. Now, if right now I'm sitting in the park on the bench, and if beside me like this ancient sadhu who had just come out of the cave, who just wants to have a chat on the park and just go back in the cave, we'd see, like in the Himalayas, let's say I'm in the Himalayas right now, even though I'm not, that sadhu would come here, and I would perhaps have a conversation where we would see that the way that sadhu acknowledges reality is that there is no longer a you or me. There is one absolute Brahman, which means there is an intelligence here that is all-pervading, and it's everything. So you can wake up in the morning and think, oh, look, Minecraft, objects are moving, yeah, science, And of course, science has a mighty purpose, don't get me wrong, But at the same time, it's like another view of it is like, whoa, everything is a manifestation of the nature of this universal sector. So who I am within is also who I am without, but then where is the within and the without? That means if there was a piece of paper, where would we draw this? And we would see these suddenly go, like a realm of self-exploration, a mystical self-inquiry suddenly opens up into realizing you have to study qualities. And so really you're not, like, I don't know what people are doing nowadays in meditation, but like some people sit down and meditate and they're like, yo, this practice is going to change my life, and they see their whole life, they're just doing one thing and other areas of their life are not going handled. But some wise students, they get to a state where they're like, okay, so it's not the act, like just the practice, like it's not just like, it's not theater, prayer is not theater, it's like you suddenly notice, okay, so what is it? And then you have to some degree, wonder about the quality of life. And when I say quality, sometimes you see some people, you can totally see just by the way a person speaks, the intensity and the quality of their life. If there is grace present or if there's desires present, because when we communicate, we cannot hide that inner design of thought that's just like what we say to people. Do you know what I mean? We can't, it's like even though we may lie in some kind of social matrix, but the truth is like we don't lie to ourselves, because it's like, why have that illusion? Why have some kind of falseness in a world that is so true? What does this imply? Knowledge and education can be categorized, and they can all try to conform to one method of, institutionalizing education. If Mr.Within was to tell Ken Robinson how to build a culture of innovation, if I just, I don't know, if my, speech was beside, I don't know, Ken Robinson's speech or something, I would tell this man, well, great, amazing way of communicating modern educational themes that need to be established through humor. I would first say this to him. Second, I would say to Ken Robinson that to have and to build a culture of innovation means that the children being born need to have more access to expressing their ideas than just people in the past who are contaminated by the hard changes of this world to some degree. So you see, imagine right now as I'm speaking, a child is born. After a couple years, this child comes and listens to this talk of mine. This child listens to this talk and says, whoa, what this guy is saying, look at the vastness of the past he's acknowledging, so let me see the future that I am here for. And so the past and the future are to some degree poetic instruments of communicating the importance of a species self-realizing itself, like a Buddha that sat by a tree because he's like, okay, everything is weird, so let me see what is here. Buddha, like, guys, this is true story, true story, bro, Buddha, he's walking and he suddenly at some point in that ancient world he was in, he goes and he sees what are some people doing in trying to realize get self-realized. And of course, Hinduism's echoes were present at his time. It's like it's not that there was no meditation then, but it's just like Buddha is going, And so Buddha suddenly sees a bunch of people who've tied ropes to a branch, and they've tied the end of the rope to their feet, and all day long they're hanging, and and so Buddha's like, what are you people doing? And these guys, they were sadhus or something, and they're like, yo, we're realizing God, man, don't disturb us, And so Buddha just told them, you guys are bats. What is this, like a Batman show? Probably didn't say Batman show, It's like, who are you people, tied with this rope thing, to a tree. And then they're like, these people are like, one of them, suddenly starts speaking and says, Buddha, I'm Batman. No, I'm kidding you. But just the whole idea is Buddha goes and sees these people totally doing very ridiculous act. He says it's like you guys are like bats. What do you mean enlightenment? What do you mean realization? What are you doing? Do you know? And so Buddha goes, and at some point he just sees like, gosh, I can't do this, and he sits by a tree. Look at this focal point in the story. You know, just the point that he sits by a tree and he closes his eyes, and it's as if a being in this system of human life. That means however much human beings have advanced, one human being, and of course there were many before Buddha, and there will be, of course, and there is many after Buddha. But I'm just saying for Buddha's time, and how the story of Buddha is very relatable to many people's realities. So Buddha sat down by a tree and closed his eyes, and it's as if for the first time he realized what he is seeking is in a dimension of stillness and silence. That means the moment you move and walk in this world, like, you know, so what I do is I walk in parks often. And so when I walk in parks often, you know, I see, like, how would I say it? Every step changes the environment, which changes how the psychology is keeping itself. So if everyone's, you know, let's say ego or personality or, main categorical, not categorical, but main, like, position psychology, if that was like, let's say, a light, literally an orb of light that wherever it went, its light beams like touched upon that surface, it's as if like the edges of this life are witnessed by a consciousness that in the moment is being all that is. The implication of this is that some people walk in this life and they suddenly see armies behind them. Some people see angels with them. Some people see, recently I've witnessed, this is very, very common in the Mount Shasta area. Some people feel like they're being guided by extraterrestrial knowledge. Some people feel like they're being guided by the greatest, most academic of, visions, and so many people are navigating through the ideology which to some degree they are creating for themselves. So to some degree, to build a culture of innovation means that this inner dialogue that is prioritizing the value of a changing world for itself to function in has to begin realizing that community means integrative opportunity. An integrative opportunity is as if like two kids who come from one comes from, let's say, with an upbringing in ancient Indian ideas, another comes from like an upbringing in the ideas of the Renaissance in Europe. And these two kids, imagine like, two girls or something, and they come and talk to one another, and they suddenly see that it's as if what they share in common is the psychology of human behavior to the world around itself, and how the sensory perception is to some degree finding a relative pattern to the innate ideology. So it's as if, like, I'll say it like this, some people have said it's as if there's two kinds of worlds we're in, Ken Robinson pointed to this. And he said it's as if like there's one, and of course, ancient Hinduism has pointed to this always, in much profound ways, but it's just like, there's a world where this world was here before you were born, and it's going to be here after you're born, and there's a world where you are like, okay, you're saying, all right, I'm this person, and this person has a name, and this name has, social activity, and da-da-da-da-da, you go on, and you suddenly have a Facebook profile. So you see, like, this is the implication of this, that every person is living for themselves. This is true. Mr. Within is going to assume this. I'm going to consider this. Every human being is living for their self until that consciousness realizes that the same intelligence of self is within others. So what that means is, it's like, I remember reading this meme on what do you call it, on Facebook, and it was very hilarious, and to some degree sad. And so what was the meme? It's as if like it shows this guy, with a suit on his phone calling his girlfriend or something, and there's a picture of the girlfriend on the phone, and so there's like sentences, and it's like, I don't know, the guy's saying, hey honey, I just took a gun and I shot our dog in the head, and I'm gonna eat our dog, for supper or something. And then, like the lady says, no, are you crazy? What are you doing? It's like there's a crazy reaction. It's like, you're so messed up and cruel and all this stuff. And so, the lady says this, and suddenly the husband says, no, honey, I'm kidding. The dog's fine. This is just a cow I'm talking about. And then the girl's like, it's a cow, it's okay, you know. So, so what does this say, guys? That, you know, we as 8 billion beings, you know, on this planet do not have a clarity of an organization of a collective mind. We do not have tolerant and patient communication. We still want toys which have turned into politicians. And so what that means is not that our politics is wrong. You know, I find that when I saw Obama speak, it was very interesting for me because I saw him as if resurrecting and rejuvenating the American political system, even though there is, who knows what's going on there. I mean, of course, what do I know? You know, but like the whole suggestion is that politics, philosophy, science, language, mathematics, these are all ways, even programming, these are all ways of looking at the world. They are like, you know, it's like the greater educations of the world are languages you learn, which then you speak through, so you utilize the ideology and you see what is the greatness of society. There have been people back in the day during Renaissance times where they would build society based on the principle that it has to be very high value. So it's as if the leaders of the time had this mentality that if everyone in the society is in such an extravagant place where you're walking and you see amazing architecture, you see great care, you see great tolerance, great compassion, great human intelligence flowing and efficiency, you will see like it's as if you want to be a part of it. So a society has to be more than just a space. A society is a co-creative area where it's advancing the knowledge of our civilization. So we will see, like, I think this may be true, that if in the UN, the greatest leaders that truly have valuable ideas, but perhaps their ideas are not being heard, are the ones who want to bring change. And this change is required to be in regards to a change of not physical proportions, but consciousness. And the consciousness is being affected by the language. So, you know, if you're concerned about, you know, I see some parents, you know, being concerned about their children taking psychedelics, taking mushrooms, taking, you know, whatever alter-stating substance or doing whatever, you know, ayahuasca ceremony in the Amazons or whatever. You know, we see like there are parents who are opposing that, but at the same time, language is something we're hallucinating on to make it real and to make meaning out of this reality. You won't believe it, but if you came and asked me, they're like, hey, Mr. Within, man, you know, like you see me in the park or something, and you're like, hey, Mr. Within, you just out of nowhere, you come and ask this, and you say, are there more dimensions? And I would tell you there's two. There's just two dimensions, do you know? Which these two eventually result into the same awareness, which means multidimensionality is just part of the stairway to heaven. The neutrality and the oneness of intelligence that permeates that is much, much greater, you know. I would immediately say there is the known and there is the unknown. And what that really means and implies is that one dimension of your universe is what your sensory phenomena, your sensory perception is saying, yo, this is it, buddy. And then another sense of the universe and another sense of the new universe is, just to see where I was continuing, like, it's unknown. So pretty much, guys, known, unknown. The unknown aspect of your intelligence is divine functioning. It's just like how the cosmos knows more than you, you know. So if the cosmos knows more than you, then Bhakti Yoga seems to be a very intelligent technology of approaching reality. But if we, like the yoga of devotion, love, you know, like compassion, to feel and abide rather than think and abide, which is always disturbed by, not disturbed, but like feeling is always there. I want to give you some examples of what I mean by communications of, I don't know what I said, but celestial dialogue to some degree, you know. And so what I want to say is that, so guys, in my personal experience, there's this world that's just, you know, I open my eyes, go out in the world, and there is a more private world. It's as if we have a public dimension and we have a private dimension. In the private dimension, only a very certain proportion of the private dimension of our lives is being communicated through our public dimension, because some people have jobs, they want to maintain a certain etiquette of behavior, But for me, for example, in these talks, because I am seeking the true source and the origin of mind and language, I am realizing that it has to be all. Do you see? It's as if there's nothing to not say, because we're trying to see where the sound comes from. Examples of inner dialogue would be, so what I'm saying is this inner dialogue is out of the private dimensions of a being's life. And so it's not relevant to other human beings. It's as if you were the only person in an island and you were wondering about the true nature of your mind, how would you approach that? Some people feel they're being guided by, spirit, by some kind of intelligence. Some people feel it's extraterrestrial, and some people feel it doesn't exist. And all of these are, this spectrum of belief and experience is originating simply out of how much a being sees themselves as a physical phenomena and how much a being sees themselves as a non-physical phenomena. The more non-physical it is, the more you are creative, because the experience is more creator-like. The more physical it is, that means you're just seeing creation. You're not even engaging, let's say, the right side of your brain to enhance and advance and to open a vision that is how would I say this to you? You can look at a tree and see a tree, and you can look at a tree and see all life. Alright, so how I would communicate this, let me just see how I can set it. Okay guys, I'm speaking about internal communication and signs of divination, and just how if you were to see your life to be like a seed with the design of destiny already in there, you're just seeing reality in accordance to what your intelligence is, and sometimes this intelligence externally creates for itself greater abstract meaning. So in what I'm saying to you, I want you as the listener to wonder about the psychology and the philosophy of language in regards to the direct experience of reality. And for one to simply see that communication is not just being made or received, it is being. That means you can look at yourself and see yourself as a communication of the cosmos, as if the cosmos was saying poetry, ta-da, I was born, and 8 billion others, So this is interesting to consider. Now, so guys, there in my life personally, to get deep down into it, I feel there was a time that I experienced as if there was a certain combination of beings around me. And so when I say around me, I mean I don't see things. Like, it's not like I look at something and I'm like, yo man, spirit. I'm seeing, like, some old spirit. It's not like that. For me, it's just innate knowing, and this innate knowing originates out of the ability of a witnessing presence. And so this witnessing presence one day is looking at my moment, this is one experience of one day in my life. And so what is the experience? And the experience is, to some degree, it's as if I'm in my living room alone, but I feel, and I, to some degree, internally can hear a lot of dialogue that has a certain design. So when I listen to people, I don't really look at the words, even though I'm playful with words. I actually see the design of the concept and how significant it is in the reality of my projection. And a projection of others, of course. There's co-creation. So I feel guided by three beings. I feel two of them, of course, they're not in the human restriction of ideology. When I say beings, it's as if it was like the intelligence of the moment didn't have to be separate, but based on the playfulness of my mind, it came into that reflection. What that means is number, language, story implications, all of these are out of the mind's phenomena, like how the mind is self-inducing a world of image. And as that image moves, it's realizing the change. A lot of education and knowledge, to be honest, in this world has not gone explored because the macro and micro in all fields of education, all knowledge, all branches of knowledge, have not come together. Like, it's like someone who it looks through a telescope and someone who is like on the moon, they need to have a conversation. So let's say like this, I'm walking in the park, I go about my day. Internally, I suddenly realize that my past is trying to speak to my future in the present. This translates as one future and two forms of a dualistic nature of my past. So I saw beings that were, the way my mind manifested it was as if one very, the imagery of it was to some degree, very direct, like as if you're on that ship of master and commander and you're just like, the side person and you're just listening to what's being said. It's like the intensity of this being's presence that my mind reflected into manifestation in that moment was like, it was as if it was very just profound. It's like the language, the communication that came from that imagery suggested its nature, but I could never know its nature, And so there was one, like commanding figure, and there was two, which was male and female energy. And this thing manifests for me in regards to just innately as I'm speaking into blue and yellow. So anytime I see these two colors, and of course this means I really appreciate the Ukraine flag. But it seems to me a perfect suggestion of male and female. And the balance of this dualistic energy, and how deep we want to consider the Shakti, Anyways, I felt I was guided by celestial companions that were the creations of my own mind. But my experience as a being throughout the day is not as a per se person, it's as a being. So some people just live in accordance, like in their waking state, they just pay attention to how they are a normal guy, But some people in their waking state wonder about the true nature of phenomena and see that that wakefulness is not originating out of a consciousness that is bound to personality. When you are beyond personality, it means to some degree you are beyond fear. And, I remember seeing this video of Putin, where they come and ask him, hey man, are you afraid of assassination or something? And Putin's like, what kind of life is that, living in fear? They say to live in fear is like not living at all. So the psychology of the self must consider how much it wants to, beyond the projection of fear, be limitless to itself. When I look at a tree, it originates simply, like you look at the ground, you see the earth, the surface of the earth, you see the trunk, and then you see it branch out into a lot of complexity. When we look at the human being, it has a oneness of existential and experiential source, and then it branches out into many senses of its own self. So that means, like, all the senses of self you have ever witnessed or considered or viewed in this life are like all the different kinds of leaves that have been temporal for this tree that's going through these cosmic passage of seasons. Poetry is to some degree freeing the mind into the recognition of how it's its own ability that's creating the world. So this is what I find, which hopefully these Mr.Within talks I do on YouTube emphasize, is that you are seeing the reality and meaning in what you see. But this can manifest as communication based on how much your attention is externalized. So with a certain proportion of external attention and internal being, I receive this communication where it's as if we are not alone here. So your soul might think that it's physically alone in the body of some life, but at the same time, your essence, your intelligence, if it has explored very unified states of being, or it has had certain experiences, like you've done, as Sadhguru says, you've done work in other places, it's like the suggestion would then be that you're not alone here. The soul never died, so that it's a collective thing expressing itself individually. So you're not just a body, and it is the mind, it's the heavens of the mind that move the earth of perception. Poetry's value is chaotic expansion into a new order of whatever it's pointing to. Poetry is like Thor's hammer, believe it or not, in regards to its ability to just like how Thor slammed his hammer to the ground and it just echoed like vibrations, it just like rippled manifestation into some kind of effect, so we see like language too has that ability if it is administered sincerely, authentically, and with clarity. I'm trying to see if I still feel like the image I wanted to share has not come across perfectly, so I want to see how I can say it. Alright guys, let's say you're some kind of channeler, let's say you're some kind of medium, let's say you're some kind of scientific genius who's having a thought experiment, whatever it is, your relationship with your imagination at times turns into a dialogue of pros and cons of what you want to decide as a personality. But that awareness that is aware of it, it can choose to be guided as an individual, or it can choose to be the guidance of the collective, which means it's like God is here before we are. That universe that is here before and after us, that intelligence is still continuing. And so, like the yogi and the mystic is like, just like how you fold your shirt and you're going to put it in the closet, lives a life of, to some degree, renouncing desire, pain, anger, suffering, and whatnot, disease and all this stuff, and so he recognizes that if you're not just a body here, and if there's something such as a mind, the mind is the moment, so you don't just, like, how you go to the shower, so you also need to some degree take care of your moment of being. Maulana Rumi has this quote, this Sufi poet from 800-900 years ago, he has this quote where, what does he say? He says, wash yourself off yourself like melting snow. In other words, recognize your true enlightened nature. And enlightenment is not a concept. It is an awareness. And best put, self-awareness. That means if you're talking to other people too long, you're not really exploring your consciousness there, And so I find, I look at a lot of talks and I see these people, of course, wondrous, amazing people who come and they're just silently there beside some guru who's, on some stage with flowers. And so these people are like, they come and bow and they put their head on the guru's feet to the point where the guru has some cloth on his leg where he's allowing that to even happen, And so it's like, it's all goodness and devotion and all this stuff, but most of the people sit there silently. Now, them sitting there silently and listening is profound, and I have no criticism against that. Of course, that's an ancient lineage. That's a pattern of, communicating enlightenment. But to some degree, one has to realize, that's an experiential aspect of it, but one has to also recognize, what we can really utilize is that, let's say if there was a meeting or gathering and some enlightening speaker wants to say something, we see that person come up, and we see at the same time an audience that listens to this speaker, but then engages, not in Q&A only, but in co-creation, into bringing new ideas and seeing what they can do together. Do you know what that means? That means, imagine everybody, we're 8 billion great inventors on this planet, and these 8 billion great inventors want to invent with one another, so their inventions combining are such a greater invention beyond comprehension. So the worlds that we, to some degree, give meaning to, come back to how our science is a relationship of not just objectivity with objectivity, but objectivity with subjectivity, which is the hard problem of science, which is consciousness. The mind should be more than an image. And so perception can align with the devotion of divination being a guidance of the divine. And so people can feel that they are not just God speaking to them, God is moving them to where they are. It's like, I feel out of this 8 billion people that are alive, I think everyone is experiencing crazy coincidences. And this is suggesting not just the beauty of the complexity of an evolving universe, but also the beauty and the simplicity of how we are being all of it right now, and who has time to go to the movies when your moment is so beautifully infinite. In modern cosmology, to some degree, they consider, the biggest thing they consider is, okay, is the universe finite or is it infinite? Is there isotropy and homogeneity? Are we assuming that the distance between galaxies is just the same? And so this suggestion in the notion of psychology, which says that we either put our own view of the world on the world that's already being here, or we find that void, that language is, a part of a season of change. Nature has much wisdom to share, because there's a way of going into nature where you're just going in there for a camping trip, and there's a way where you actually rediscover the unified expression of your intelligence with the intelligence of everything else that's here. Some people feel they're being guided by families from other dimensions and star systems. I've literally met people who see this. For a certain time in my life, the idea was real to me. Nowadays, the idea has no value. My experiential presence does, but the idea still has some significance in why it was the design of it was shown to me. So you see, when Einstein said you can either see everything as a miracle or nothing as a miracle, the whole suggestion of that is either you look at this universe and you see an intelligence so beyond that it is reminding itself what it is through the eyes of man, or you see that it is so empty that we can't do anything about it, and boo-hoo. Do you know what I mean? And boo-hoo as in boo the who. What that means is, guys, we cannot just rely on a naming system to deliver our great advancement of civilization based on how much we hope we can communicate with one another. Or in that case, the whole attention of our civilization is going in on communication workshops. And we don't need that as much. We need self-realization in the awareness that all communication is suggesting how the origin of your mind is receiving this world. So internal dialogue can manifest in what your attention is making significant to you, but to study the nature of your attention means that you're studying the nature of how you're an individual in a dualistically, either infinite or finite changing world. So it's phenomenal. Our eyes, even though we're one physical body, I'm just one person, but my vision is multi-present. Do you see that? My body is like I'm just this guy here, in this observable universe, who knows about dark matter and dark energy in regards to multidimensionality, and multiversality, but just the suggestion that the known and the unknown lead to an alchemy beyond words. So the sadhus and the yogis were really ahead of us technologically. Yogic science is so advanced that sometimes I'm like, yo man, we need more scientists doing yoga, And so I think thank God there is the great, advancement of our civilization, which many men shall agree, is yoga pants. And so this idea means that the idea of yoga is being kept alive in the mind of the Western world, and even though it's filled with desire, but the suggestion is, you are your true self. No joke, guys. Study your imagination. Don't devalue it, I talked to this guy. It was so sad that I was feeling sad, in that moment with this guy, And I told him, hey, man, have you written something? And, the guy was the owner of a bookstore downtown Toronto, yeah. And so I asked him, and he says, there was a time I would drink a lot, and when I would drink a lot, I wrote a book. And this book, it was like classic emotional, girl, guy, family type of shit, And so the guy's saying this to me, and I'm like, yo, man, that's interesting. And I'm like, why didn't you ever pursue it? And you know what he told me? You know what the owner of this bookstore, he was selling so many books, but you know what he told me in regards to why he never did anything with his book? He said, I felt it wasn't good enough, and he said, I felt I wasn't good enough. And that made me see suddenly, oh my God, how many creative people are there in this world that have something good to share, but their valuation of self is limiting them from actually engaging in the opportunities of life. Psychology, philosophy, and science are all relevant when you're walking in the park because you require all of your intelligence at once. I found it phenomenal. If I ask you right now with your, right finger, index finger, touch your left elbow, you'll do that. And then once you do that, you'll suddenly, for a second, say, okay, did I have to plan for years? Did I have to, go to a very intense, conformist educational system, Or did I just do it in an instant? So what is this intelligence of life that is an instant, spontaneous happening? And so I find it's very interesting. I see many modern speakers today, people we categorize in the self-enlightenment game, online and in the public, media. But I will tell you, they're actually poets. Eckhart Tolle, Mooji, Papaji, Ramana Maharshi, these guys are and they are poets of what? Direct experience. So you can have poetry about talking about some fictional magic, or you can have, some magical, future, space future, or you can have just an actual ability to communicate an experience. And so you are so directly communicating what is happening that it becomes poetry to a civilization that has been basing its normality on a very ridiculous, flawed notion of how, it's just some person and it's like, it's like a human being, it's like you are the being first, and then the human aspect of your attention can be considered humanity, I hope this talk is, to some degree, making you see that if communication was a certain energy, it's based on what you do with it. And so it's based on how much the communication is real for you. And to very playful minds that are walking in genius, what that means is that it's like to some people, I don't want to use words, titles, savants, but I say some people are activated and open to an intelligence which, because of their unified experience, it's like their mind can see many themes at once. They can see many dimensions and many other dimensions, and all in one dimension that is their experience now. It's like they have that clarity. We are the epitome of a changing universe, wondering why it's changing. How hilarious is it? Intuitive communication and internal dialogue at times is running very close and parallel to just how, and there's a river of accumulated thought moving in this world. So when you go, let's say you, like, come after work, you sit on the couch or something, you sit in nature, you go outside and sit on a gigantic rock or something, smooth rock or something, and you go sit there and you're just in nature, and for a second you just look at life and you become still. You for a second drop every idea, person, whatever notion you have, and you're like, if I was right now just spontaneously manifested in this world, how would I be? And you would suddenly abide by your natural preferences. And for most people in the Western world, it's going to be paying attention to their body, physical body. So it's as if some people are living such hectic lives that for a second when they slow down and they sit in nature, still and silent, they go into the park or something, and they're just with them, with life, without being anything or any idea, they suddenly adjust to their natural state. What that means is, like, once you've done a kegger, a keg stand, once you've gone to a kegger and done a keg stand, like actually done it, then you know. Do you know what I mean? It's like you know what the process is, right? You're like, oh, keg, gymnastic. I think that's actually how a gymnast would party. I think Olympic gymnasts party with kegs. This could be a very good show, a very good documentary out of it. Sometimes I look at this life and I wonder, wow, the history was so rich. And even at that time, it wasn't concerned about money that much. People can be guided by nature. So let's say you're walking and suddenly, you see, like, a bird, like, flying right in front of you, and so it passes, and so you suddenly notice the direction. The essence of communication comes to an unchanging moment, but it does not mean there will not be terminals of intuitive guidance. Terminals of intuitive guidance is to some degree how you are just being silent and still enough to witness the movement of your ideas, and then through the movement of your ideas, through your direct and sincere just knowing of who you are, self-knowing, suddenly know what the pattern is. It's as if we look in this universe, and like, Hubble, who led to the Hubble telescope, who built it, he looked at the sky and he recognized that the stars that were not shining as brighter, they were further away from us, meaning they're moving faster away. And the stars that are closer to us, they're much brighter. So he was trying to think of a measurement system of it, and to some degree he included time. So he said he considered the velocity of 2 points, as if this is an infinite line you would stretch, but in more than one dimension. So Hubble came and saw this, and he saw the distance of it, and it had value, and he developed. And before Hubble's time, it's as if there was no concept of a galaxy. So he begins to notice these things, these images he's gaining with this telescope are telling him that they're like star clusters, groups, and all this stuff that it wasn't concerned before. So the more we reveal and discover about nature, the more our sciences, philosophy, and everything adjusts. So that means the change of now is very profound. And I think I was interrupted by a phone call. Everything in life is a communication of cosmic activity. Discover your true self. You have not just come here to live for a future that's going to get here one day. You have come here to be. And That means enjoying your moments of being. Most people think that the value of communication is in what they're going to say. But those who truly understand the value of communication just say it now. So what that means is you don't try to think of how you're going to, for example, keep maintain your relationship with family. You just do. You abide by, the awareness to the family of existence. And, prayer for some, they see it as an act, but for others, it's a communication with the cosmos. It's as if a human being is really looking at the world and communicating. And this communication means that our day is intelligent as much as we are, and so this day can be communicated to. And so to just see an objective world that's lifeless is cruel to the mind of a species that is obviously so multidimensionally void that we are, like realities like the rope and the snake. We're looking at a rope and we're thinking it's a snake. Our sensory perception is a very narrow range of reality, and that's why waking state is very short. Some sages have said you'll die and you'll feel as if it was a few days, the whole life. Much of nature's intelligence happens on its own. The parts that we individually associate with can be controlled, but nature is the underlying principle. Communication to celestial phenomena means your mind has acknowledged everything in your moment and is wondering about the next intelligence, which can be a story but should not be. That means the counterculture to the mistakes of the past 20th century is groups of people emphasizing on the communication of a healthier world. But after the era of the advanced communicators, we will be in a totally different world where the function of activity will have a different meaning. So like the meaning of activity right now is go to your job. In the future, it could be so technologically advanced that, our jobs come to us. All reality and realities are happening at once. The glory of your mind should not go unexplored. Much blessings and namaste.